Hello, my name is Voya and welcome to my deep guide, and today, we are doing the in-depth review of the Dasung 13K, this time the color version. I've already done the first impressions and unboxing of this one. If you haven't checked it out, do check it out after you've watched this, because it's a useful supplemental type of information. In this review portion of the test, I'm going to be checking out in very controlled type of environment. I've set up the camera to the best of my ability to mimic exactly what the human eye is seeing, locked settings and all sorts of things. Like a lot of precautions went into trying to capture as authentic as possible type of footage of this monitor. So what is it? This is an e-ink or ePaper powered monitor. This is a 13-inch monitor, 300 ppi in black and white, 150 ppi for color. No, it's not an active matrix. This is a kaleido panel, which means that color, any kind of color content is always going to be at 150 ppi, and any kind of black and white content is always going to be at 300 ppi. In short, how it works, it's a black and white screen that has a thin layer of red, green and blue strips. That's called CFA, or color filter array layer on top of it, and that's what gives you the color content on panels of this type. Why would somebody consider an ePaper screen? Well, if you're not familiar with it, ePaper screen is a reflective screen. What that means is that it captures the environmental light around you and reflects it back to you, as opposed to having a backlight that shines directly into your eyes. Now, this is a front lit device, so you can use it in darker conditions as well, which is really good, because kaleido panels or color e-ink panels are naturally darker, again because of that CFA layer on top, because it blocks the light coming in and it blocks the reflected light coming out. So you have naturally quite a considerable amount of darkening when compared to a purely monochromatic screen, for example. So presence of the front light is a good thing, but then maybe if you're not familiar with how this technology functions, you may say like, but okay, but then it's also emitting light and it's bad. Well, it's not a backlight, it's a front light. That light is a thin layer around the edges of the screen that's shining towards the screen, not to you, so that it actually goes through the ink cells and then it's reflected back to you. So it's reflected light that goes translucency through the ink cells and then reflects back again through those ink cells, and only then reaches your eyes, as opposed to LCD and OLED panels, which basically shine the light directly at your eyes, which causes all sorts of problems. So that's why you would consider a monitor like that, and why it's much more expensive than what you would normally expect from a 13-inch 300 ppi screen. The design is exactly the same as its monochromatic brethren or siblings. It's completely the same. There's not even a different color or anything like that. It's exactly the same stuff, so it looks nice. It has an aluminum back cover or alloy cover, has a speaker here, mini HDMI here, USB-C here. Both can be used for signals. USB-C can be used for data transmission because this is also touch enabled, and if you use HDMI, then you need to use USB-C for touch functionality with Windows. If you want to use this for Mac, then you need to use their proprietary Dasung paper-like client, which is an adventure in its own. For that, please do watch the 13K black and white review, because I cover all of the woes and issues with that, obtaining it and installing it. In that video, so I'm not going to be covering that here. That one becomes necessary if you want to use this for Mac. It also has a power connection here. Unfortunately, no, it cannot be connected to your device via a single cable, so USB-C is only for data transmission and signal transmission, not for power transmission. And on the other side, we also have a plugged up 3.5mm audio jack. It's a fairly light unit, it's very kind of thin. One major difference though, when compared to the monochromatic version, is that monochromatic version had like magnets that go like here, and you use those magnets to kind of make it mount to a VESA mount. That, for some reason, is not an option and it's not present on the 13K color, which is a problem because that makes this one not VESA compatible, which is a very, very strange decision to kind of have, because it not only is not VESA mount compatible, but it doesn't even have like a mount here on the back that you can mount it on a tripod. It has no mounting capabilities of any kind. The hole that you see here is for a fixed foot that just stands here and gives you a fixed angle. You do get a cover with it, but you might as well not, because again, in the 13K black and white video, I've covered that in detail. If you're interested to see more details about it, then you can check that video again. But the magnets are misaligned, they don't hold the device the way it should, the quality is terrible, and it's just something that I would never ever use for this device. So while the panel itself, as you'll see, is fairly impressive, there is a glaring design issue here, and that is complete lack of mountability of the 13K color as opposed to the black and white screen, which is VESA mountable. The final bit of info before we head on with the examples, detailed examples of the image quality of this display. You need to set up your computer to optimal settings for use with a ePaper display. Again, I am referencing the 13K black and white review video because all of the steps are in great detail shown there, so I'm not going to repeat it. Here I'm just going to give you a short list of things that you have to keep in mind. First of all, you need to enable the high contrast theme on your windows. You need to make sure that you disable the night light. That is a very, very important part, because if you have night light turned on, that's going to create a terrible image quality on any of these displays, so that's an absolute must. It's a good idea to create an inverted type of cursor that's black on white background and white on black background. Adjust your cursor size and make sure that you use the correct resolution. And for my type of use case scenarios, scaling, image scaling of around 250% was a nice fit. For any and all other details that you may need for how to set up your computer windows in this instance for use with an ePaper screen, please do check the 13K black and white review video on my deep guide. So let's start with the buttons and what they do. For clarity's sake, right now we're in the middle of winter, right? And I only have a window to this side, and outside it's snowing. So it's not really the optimal conditions to kind of show without the front light what this device can do, but this is what it looks like without the front light in these lighting conditions. For clarity's sake, I am going to turn on the front light, and incidentally that's the second button here. The first one is obviously the power button. The front light button here will cycle through front light modes. The first one is going to be fully cold, then fully warm, and then you have a mixed light. In the middle we have plus and minus signs, which work in combination with some of the other buttons here. So for example, for the front light button, you hold the front light and then you hit plus to increase the intensity all the way up to maximum. And if you go further, then it's going to cycle to minimum. And it has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 levels of intensity. What I'm going to set is to something that I like. So we're now at level 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I think 5 or 6. Let's say 5 is an okay level for me in these conditions in the mixed light. So we got these 4 buttons already covered, and then we have the bottom 2, M and C. First let's cover the C, which is full screen clearing, so that's why the C is. M is for different modes, and like the black and white version, we have several different modes. Now we are in text mode, then we have image mode, then we have active mode, and we have web mode. Plus and minus buttons on their own will cycle through contrast modes or contrast intensity on a per mode basis. So for example, here we are in M1, which is web mode. If now let's find a little bit of text, and there we go. So we clear out, and if I go with plus, I'm going to be, you can see it clearly on the image, I'm increasing the contrast, and same like the front light, it then cycles. So we have minimum amount of contrast, so that would be level 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and that's it. So we got 9 levels of contrast and 10 levels of the front light. This, for example, I can set it to minimum contrast on the web mode, then I can switch to text mode and go to, you know, the darkest setting that I want. And if I switch between different modes, it will remember that in web mode I have this contrast setting, and in text mode I have other contrast settings. So the contrast setting is per mode settable, which is really cool and kind of necessary, because you are probably going to find the setting that you like and set and forget, and you just switch between modes depending what it is that you want to do. So let's start going through different modes so that you can see how they differ. The web mode is the mode 1, and it actually makes sense because it's like the best balance between colors, contrast, clarity, deghosting, and speed. This version is a touch version. This is not something that you can have on a black and white display, and the touch will only work via the USB-C connection. That's where the data connection goes through. If you have it just as an HDMI connection, you will not have the ability to have the touch. So that's an important thing to keep in mind. Now, with the touch, you can see that it's extremely responsive for images, for text, and once you actually start to zoom in that you don't have super uber tiny text, the clarity of this panel, despite it having the Kaleido screen, which is naturally going to be fuzzier than a black and white screen, it's really good. I can have very nice clarity of text here under these conditions, and I am at, I'm at minimum level of contrast, which you can clearly see in the image. So you can also see with the image that it's able to handle this dark image with indigo, gray, black, and other black colors, and some more indigos and sharp shadows and a little bit of green here. It's actually able to handle this very nicely. Let me zoom out so that you can see more of the image. The colors are not super saturated, which is normal for a Kaleido screen. But if we start increasing the contrast, you can start to see, let's clear out the ghosting so it's more cleaner. You can see that it's changing the character, and it's not only that you are increasing the contrast, but you're, especially in this region here, you'll be able to see that you will be able to find a nice balance between the colors and the hues. So for example, here it's too much. We have to, losing the details over here, and I'm focusing on the red button in the middle, because red is a difficult color for Kaleido panels to deal with. So now I'm gonna back off a little bit until this starts exploding. All right, so that's my range, minimum and maximum. And now between these, I'm going to again kind of navigate until I reach this level. I have no idea which level this is, but for this image and for this mode, this is the one that gives me the nicest type of an image quality. And you can see that this kind of gives you a very nice balance for both images. So colors and images and text itself. And I can have a very nice clear differentiation between bold, normal text, the titles that are a little bit bluer. And now we can see, it's like the images that I've set up, they're rendering very nicely. This is a naturally darker image. But if I wanted to make it even brighter, I can. Just step down and that's it. And here we have, if we deghost, you can see that this is a red nail polish, and then we have the skin color tone here. which it can't really handle in a great way. That's a Kaleido panel limitation, how it works. But overall, I think that this is a really, really good representation of the content that you're looking at. And let's not forget that you can always turn off the front light and have this content shown in your natural environment light, so that you don't have anything shining at you. This is where Kaleido panels again are going to have a little bit of a negative, because naturally they are much darker than the regular monochromatic screens. So with the color version of the Dasung 13K, you kind of rely on that front light quite a lot, but thankfully it's a nice front light. You have both warm and cold, and you have many intensity levels to choose from, so you are pretty much guaranteed to be able to find a good setup for your environment and for the conditions that you are in. And naturally you are going to be able to use this monitor completely normally in completely dark conditions as well. If we're checking out some different types of contents here, so for example an old Trello board that I no longer use, but you can see that even using the high contrast theme in Windows, this actually works quite nicely. Video playback is okay on the Dasung 13K, so it is genuinely impressive that it can do these speeds and that level of clarity. But as you can see, we're still in the web mode. You do get that kind of flickering quality of the image. And finally, here is the color wheel in web mode, minimum contrast. And I'm going to just cycle through all of the contrast levels so that you can see how it affects colors and when we start to lose the differentiation. So for example, red and orange are now basically completely lost, and that's why that example with the arm and the red nail polish was kind of washed out, and you can clearly see that issue happening here. And that's Kaleido panels. They just simply are very limited as far as the colors go, especially in the red hue. And at a certain point, at the largest or strongest contrast point, you can just clearly see how red, orange, and even yellow, orange, and even the darker shades of yellow or more saturated shades of yellow are basically becoming all identical. So that's something that you really need to be aware of, how the contrast does affect the color display on these panels in different modes. So that's your web mode. Now let's switch over to the text mode. And you can see that immediately everything is a little bit different, and we have quite a less dithering going on in text mode on the image here. So if I clear it up, you can see that this fade here from indigo grayish into the dark colors, which is a very difficult thing to do for a Kaleido panel, it's able to handle it in a quite nice way. And now I'm going to set up the contrast level in the same exact way like I did before. So I'm going to go, this is the minimum contrast level, and I'm going to start increasing the contrast, and I can immediately see that there's no point for me to actually just go darker and darker, because for images, the lightest, or maybe the second lightest, but I think the lightest contrast level is the one that's most acceptable for images type of content in text mode. Text, however, you can actually pump it up to be super kind of strong if that's what you're looking for. As you can see, that's the strongest contrast in text mode, and this is the weakest, strongest. And it just kind of has this boldening effect. Now, I'm not entirely sure that that's really necessary, because the clarity of the display is actually really good, even as it is now, but it's certainly there as an option. What does interest me here is the balance between different contents in this mode, which would be minimum contrast text mode. And I can still see clear differentiation between titles, colors of the titles, so dark blue or bluish, and the black bold and the black normal font, all very, very clearly differentiated. No problems whatsoever in here. The image is perfectly readable. This is a low resolution image, so this is not the panel's fault. That's basically just how the image is. This is an old article. And here we can clearly see immediate differentiation between the rendering of the colors between the web mode and the text mode, because that problematic area of the orange and red, we can actually see quite a lot more differentiation here between the two. And if you even step one contrast level up, it's starting to be actually more of an orange and more of a red type of a color. So staying with that contrast level, I believe that would be step up number 1. So it's level 2. I'm just going to go through this here and see how it looks like. It just looks pretty good. I mean, to me, this looks excellent for reading. So text, absolutely excellent for reading. Now let me just go into web mode. So this is web mode, the way that I set it before. And we switch now to text mode. You know what? That web mode on the text itself, there's simply no differences whatsoever. The only difference that I see is when I switch to text mode, I do get more clarity in the image itself. Responsiveness and clarity overall seems to be pretty much on par between the two. So I would be able to comfortably use either of the two, with the small caveat that in text mode with the low contrast level settings, I do get a little bit more clarity in the orange and red section of the colors. Same abandoned Trello to just see how the ghosting performance is in text mode. And yeah, in text mode, the ghosting performance is more increased in these high contrasting and difficult types of situations. So let's just quickly check to go to web mode and start scrolling here. While the ghosting is absolutely there, you can still see it, quite a lot of ghosting. The character is a little bit different, but then again, maybe you see the dithering constantly changing and shifting. I find that to be a little bit distracting in this type of a scenario, whereas when I switch to text mode and clear, I don't have as much. There's a little bit of shifting here and there, but I don't have as much, although ghosting is much more pronounced. So in these difficult conditions, Kaleido panels will always struggle, and you just have to find which compromise is the best solution for you. Text mode is clearly not going to be the one to use for video watching, but again, it is impressive that you can do so. So you can still do something like this, and if I kind of lower the contrast level and then clear up, you are able to get some kind of things, but honestly, you know, that orange and grayish kind of thing, the differentiations here are really, really bad, and the blue is just not that great. And then you can see in this example that while the speed and deghosting is there, it's definitely not something that is a good or a pleasant type of rendering for video watching. Can you do it? Yes, you can. But this would not be the mode for video watching for me. Checking out the color wheel, so we're in text mode, minimum contrast level, and I'm just going to increase so that we can see where things start to, you know, get equalized. Even at the minimum level, we still have very small differentiation between the saturated levels of the red. They're already equated, and as soon as we start increasing the contrast, yeah, it's starting to get worse, but we can already see a slightly better differentiation between this problematic area for Kaleido panels, which is the red, orange, and the orange. Naturally, as we increase, it's starting to equalize more and more until we finally get to, pretty much the same type of situations that we've had in maximum level of contrast, except that now we are seeing quite a bit of equalization in the blue and in the green as well. Right, next we are switching to image mode. So from text to image mode, and it's, I've never set it before, so it started at the darkest quality, and I'm going to zoom at the image. same as before, so that we can see exactly what's what. We can see very nice fading here, not too much dithering, quite good differentiation, and really nice differentiation between the gray and the indigo colors here, and the red is quite visible even at the lightest contrast levels. So let's start increasing the contrast and see how it behaves. Okay, it's starting to be too dark now. Let's go a little bit back, a little bit too bright, something like this. I think this would be what I would use for the image setting here. So let's see what the text looks like. And we see very crisp looking text, good differentiation between the bolds, between the small fonts here. Even if we zoom out, it's very clear for reading. We go further, excellent reading here, excellent readability. Yeah, definitely best image rendering is in the image mode. Here's the problematic one. And we see absolutely, without a question, best balance between the orange and the red in the image mode as well. So really good for a Kaleido panel, right? We're talking about that category. You can't really compare these displays to LCDs or OLEDs or anything like that. But for a Kaleido panel, this is capable. This is absolutely capable. I like the consistency that I'm able to set on one image, and it's, you know, consistently good throughout the entirety of the content that I'm going through here. So that's pretty cool. Let's see the difference between text, web mode, and image mode through here. So let's now go, this is the web mode. And I guess we could go a little bit, no, you see, with the web mode, you don't have fine. You would have to kind of find a compromise solution. Let's say like this. So web mode, text mode, and this is the image mode. So you can see that I'm kind of gravitating towards very consistent type of contrast levels that are displayed. So this is the web mode, text mode, image mode. Very subtle differentiations when you kind of look at it, but they are there. The most important part for me is that the rendering of text largely remains intact between these modes. So when you're kind of switching between the web mode, you're looking at what the deghosting performance is like. So we're moving up and down, and you can see some tracing happening here. Then we can move to text mode, where again, you have the similar type of thing, but overall, the ghosting is a bit more intense. You can actually see it more clearly, but there's like this slight level of sharpness, perceived sharpness, that's a little bit more crisper in the text mode. And when we switch to image mode, the ghosting is very vague, like it is on the web mode as well. So we're talking about really fine differences here. And any of these modes, when calibrated to the contrast level that you like, I think are performing really well. However, if you want to test out the deghosting performance, well, this is why the old Trello cards are here with the really nasty red-orange background. And as soon as we start moving things around, we get a lot of flickering. Yeah, quite a bit of flickering, quite a lot of flickering here on the side, and a lot of ghosting as well. So if I start doing several passes left and right, I gotta be careful not to trigger the cards so that I don't erase this. There we go, a couple of passes here. You can see a lot of deghosting, very clear ghosting here. But the biggest difference here with the distraction is the amount of inconsistent flickering, especially in here. As you can see this card moving, it's doing a lot of flickering. And I think that's exactly what we're gonna see, is that when you start using the cursor, you're gonna start seeing a lot of, there we go, quite a lot of strange artifacting in the image mode. Now, let's switch back to web mode and see how that situation is. And you can see that we do not have any semblance of that strange kind of diagonal artifacting of updating here. If we go to text mode, we get some occasionally, So it depends in which hue it is and how it contrasts with the cursor. Here we don't, here we do, here we don't. In this hue we get it. So it's a little bit more while when we switch to image mode, it's basically always present in some capacity and some level. So yeah, that would be a major distraction for me, and any kind of benefits that the image mode is exhibiting, those would be negated because of this kind of artifacting and flickering nature of the display mode. Video playback in image mode is not something that you should be doing, and you can actually see it even in a paused frame. It's kind of flickering here and there in a very strange way, but while the rendering of the blues and the hues is definitely better than what we have on other modes. So yeah, the sky is better rendered and it's better clarity, and we have better differentiation of this really difficult terrain for this panel to render. You have this constant flickering, and again, if you add the cursor on top, you're going to have the artifacting. So that artifacting is a very serious kind of effect that you have in image mode, and with the quality of the web mode and the text mode, I just don't see the benefits that the image mode brings to the table. But let's see what the color wheel will show. So here is the color wheel, and very similar to the text, actually a little bit more. No, it's the hue thing is the same, but the differentiation between red and orange is much, much better than in any other mode. So I guess that is the whole point of the image mode. So now let's start increasing the contrast. We're currently at the minimum level. So we start increasing here, and we see the very similar kind of thing happening, except that, yeah, the differentiation between the colors is slightly better and maintained a little bit better over the course of the increasing contrast. Especially here, you can actually see a gradient going through the hues, which other modes were not able to do. They would just simply go through difference here. So yeah, that's pretty much the similar story. We get the best rendering of the hues and the best differentiation between the hues and saturation of colors in image mode, but that flickering is simply a no-go, and the difference is simply not drastic enough for me to warrant or justify the flickering nature of the image mode. Finally, moving from the image mode, we get to the last mode, which is the active mode, and we can do the same type of contrast calibration as we've done before. So we're gonna zoom in on the image, deghost, and now start adjusting the contrast level. So I'm gonna go to minimum as per usual. And you can see a lot of dithering here and color banding, and it's showing JPEG artifacts in a really, really brutal way. So even at minimum contrast, it's gonna expose things that are, I mean, you can, I don't know if the camera is picking up, but I can actually see the JPEG compression dots. Not just the cubic artifacting, but the actual dots in here, which makes it very, very unpleasant to look at. So trying to increase the contrast and see what we get. Well, these get masked in the darkness at this point, so that's okay. We get okay-ish kind of thing, but it's very grainy, and I lose the ability to kind of differentiate between fine details. So for me, this is too dark, this is okay, this is a little bit too bright, so maybe something like this. But you can see that we just don't see the details in the screen until you kind of zoom in. So you see how they disappear and then they start appearing. That's the panel doing this, and that's the mode actually doing this. This is not the image interactively losing details. Yeah, already there, it's not something that I would be looking for in a regular viewing experience. Rendering of the text is fine. It's still sharp, although it does have a softer quality to it. Yeah, the edges are a little bit more kind of fuzzier, and I just don't get that crispness that I do from other modes. So this is clearly, yeah, so you can see me trying to fiddle around and trying to find a mode in the active mode for reading, and I simply can't, because no matter what I do, these images are simply not good enough, and this is the clear example here. So yes, it can render text, yes, it can render images, but so far it is the worst performing mode so far, but it's called active. So let's wait and see until we get to the video mode and see if it kind of has some redemption there. However, before going to the redemption phase, potentially redemption phase, we need to check out the ghosting performance, and it's quite a lot of ghosting, but I'm not seeing any kind of flickering. So that's a definite benefit over the image mode and the text mode. And let's see the cursor. Yep, cursor is like in the web mode. It's actually very, very clear, but we leave tons and tons of ghosting. You can actually create little artworks with the amount of ghosting that you will see and have in particular hues when you are in active mode. So that is clearly the worst performing ghosting performance of all of the modes so far. And finally, we check out the same section of the video here. Well, yeah, it's not able to kind of deal with this stuff in a good way. Let's do a clear, so let's see. Yeah, it's very, very difficult for a Kaleido panel to deal with this palette. That's why I chose it, so that we can see what the differentiations are. It's able to pick out like blue here of a person, and the sky is kind of there. You would need to kind of push contrast really far up to get anything, but it's very, very difficult to find a setting here in a good mode, and I just don't see why would I want to use this over a web mode, which this is the web mode. It's the same thing, but a little bit better. And yeah, a text mode so far in the lowest contrast, I think, honestly has the best rendering, but it does have that artifacting. Image mode is not something that I would use. The web mode is quite a nice kind of a compromise. Although, yeah, clearly the text mode is the one that is most clear for kind of showing the content itself. But I think that web mode lends itself to be the best kind of overall compromise here, with the active mode just having, you know, the worst of most of the modes, so not really that fun. And checking out the color wheel, and already now I'm starting to see graininess that I haven't seen in other modes. There's like a very serious amount of detail degradation here that we simply do not have. This is not the image, and this is not the panel itself. This is actually the web mode doing all of these things. And again, I see that granularity, so I think it's doing something to the resolution to try and improve the speed, but at a very, very great expense of image quality. This is minimum amount of contrast, so we're going to start increasing it to see how the color wheel behaves, and it's not good. It's very, very extreme, like the text mode actually. Yeah, quite almost as extreme as the text mode, but nowhere near clear differentiation of hues or saturation levels as the text mode has. An important note to mention here is that you do have the option of using the Dasung paper-like client. More on that if you want to know what it takes to actually install, to find where to download it and install it and all that kind of stuff. You can look at my 13K Mac version black and white in-depth review, and everything is covered there in great in-depth. So I'm not going to cover that whole thing again, as well as the functionality of the Paperlike client. But just in short, it's a place where you can also adjust your contrast, image mode, front light tuning, and you get a little bit, here you get advanced control between the fine-tuning the level of brightness and how the temperature of the front light is, because you have much more granularity here, and you also have some other options to kind of use. So it is a helpful companion for a device like this. I mean, for example, I can just clean ghosting and it cleans it there. You can map that to a keyboard shortcut. You can make it to auto clear ghost every some amount of seconds after switching a window, etc., etc. So very, very useful kind of thing if you want to use this monitor as your primary monitor or even a secondary monitor, although you got to be aware of, yeah, that it's kind of tricky to install and find if you have any amount of decent internet security in place. I'm now in a fully dark room, and the only kind of light that you're kind of seeing from here is from the screen of my laptop. So I'm going to lower that as well to the minimum, but I do need it to kind of see some things. So this is with the front light, of course, completely turned off. When I turn it on, this is fully cold, this is fully warm, and this is a mixed content. And I'm just going to go through intensity levels so that you can see how it looks like. So mixed levels, minimum, to maximum, and you can see quite nice, very, very nice and uniform quality of the front light here. In the cold, it's also quite uniform, maybe a tiniest smidge of intensity on the edges, but that's super small. Overall, extremely nice uniformity of the panel here. And let's go through intensity levels of the cold light, how it performs. Okay, and now back to maximum and switching to the warm light. Yeah, we do have some intensity bleed here, but very, very mild, and it's not super pronounced. There are no like sharp spikes. It's nice and soft. So overall, quite good uniformity of the warm light as well. And let's go through intensity levels. So lowest intensity. And there we go. So finally going back to this level. And in these conditions, I would happily use, let's go and look at content, for example. So let's go to the article that we've talked about before and go like this. Actually, yeah, lowest amount of front light is quite nice. And here is where you can actually get benefits from that Paperlike client, because if it wants to start, nope, that was the wrong one to click on, unfortunately. So now NVIDIA is going to be like, yeah, we want all of your stuff. So what I meant to click on is the Paperlike client, where you can see that we can actually make it even darker with the Paperlike client. So if the darkness level was not exactly what you wanted, then you can move it there, and then you can go much, you know, to extreme levels of brightness. But it's a very nice kind of mix. And also, speaking of mix, you can control where that mix is for the mix cold. So fully warm, fully cold, and let's say strike something in the middle around here, and maybe something like this. And there we go. So now I have an okay setting that I would enjoy to use comfortably in a fully dark room. So that's pretty cool to see that you have that options. What I would like to see more is, of course, more improvements in the Dasung Paperlike client. So, for example, setting your own favorite you know, intensity levels and the mix level and things like that, that can actually be transferred to the panel itself. and that you're not dependent on this client. And this becomes more important when you switch to ecosystems that don't support the client. So for example, Linux, which is the next thing that I'm going to try now, because I'm gonna try and boot the system in Linux and see what it says to this panel. Of course, I'm not going to be changing the whole theme to high contrast theme in Linux. I just want to see if it functions or not optimize Linux to use for an ePaper device. So right now I'm just going to hit restart and see how it behaves during the boot up, when it's going to get some signal, data, and just how it behaves in a very real type of situation. So right now it's restarting, it doesn't have any signal. And let's see if it gives me the boot selection menu. So now on my screen, no, it doesn't. So the selection is just on the primary screen. I'm just going to go to Linux for it to boot. And this is genuinely the first time that I'm even testing this out, just to kind of see what Linux will say to this one. I'm using Mint on this laptop. And let's see if it's going to like it or not. So far nothing. Nope. So USB-C so far doesn't have anything. It's not recognizing it. I'm going to unplug and plug it back in to see if that helps kind of the situation a little bit. Nope, nothing. Let's power it on and see, maybe that's what it wants. It's not a happy puppy. Let's go to display settings. Nope, only one display is detected. So via USB-C, it's not really working with Linux. Let's try with HDMI and see what we get then. All right, so HDMI hooked up, pressing power, and display settings. Nope, not really. Not seeing anything. So nope, unfortunately, it does not work in a Linux environment. And I am now booting into Windows, and already now, before I even gotten the login window, it has recognized Type-C, it does have an input, and there we go. Now it has the thing that it wants, and it boots up and it works. So the panel works perfectly fine with Windows environment. If you have the Mac version and you use the Paper-like client, which is a necessary thing, then it will work with the Mac as well. But so far it doesn't seem like this panel can be used in a Linux environment, unfortunately. Power consumption is pretty much the same as we've had it on the black and white version. So now I've enabled the front light, switching through different modes of the front light, and it's kind of changing. And I'm going to attempt in a strange way to get to the maximum level of the front light. And let's see, so this is maximum front light intensity, and we're at around 9 watts. So the consumption is fairly low, but unfortunately, yeah, you do gotta have to use that power plug, as it does not have USB-C power capabilities. So there we are. That's the Dasung 13K color. 13-inch 300 ppi in black and white and 150 ppi in color. Kaleido 3 monitor. That's touch enabled and front lit. Genuinely impressive. And one of the things that I've reacted to on this display is that unlike the 13K black and white, which had an okay front light, but the warm front light on that panel had quite a lot of green tint in it. That's thankfully not present on this one. This one has, as far as I remember, much more uniform front light than the 13K black and white, and the warm light is much nicer, and that creates this softer, more pleasant, and more like reading off a piece of page than on the 13K. However, because it's Kaleido panel and its color, the use of front light is an absolute requirement. I haven't found lighting conditions where I found the inherent darkness of a Kaleido panel to be okay without the use of a front light. Maybe it would be perfectly fine to use on the outdoors, but that is a moot point because it requires the use of AC power connectivity at all times, despite it being a very modest consumer, which is another point of an ePaper device. I mean, at maximum it's going to consume like 9 watts or something like that, but I think it needs higher voltage than 5 volts for the front light to actually maintain that quality that it has, and therefore it requires the use of AC mains. So it's not a portable screen. It's not a screen that you can use outside and things like that, even though it shines and it's best for use outside. So that's a bit of a kind of thing. So what are my final thoughts about the Dasung 13K color? I think overall it's an absolutely phenomenal device that, like the 13K black and white, elevated us into a new era of what the actual real-world usability of an ePaper monitor is, computer monitor is. That one elevated it for black and white displays. The Dasung 13K color does the exact same thing, except this time for color content. Is it gonna be like a direct replacement for your LCD and OLED displays? Of course not, because this technology is nowhere near as far as color representation and things like that. I mean, if you have any dependency or any need for any kind of color accuracy representation, e-ink or e-paper technology is not there yet, and it therefore should not be considered by you. It's a nice thought, but it's not there yet. Therefore, this one cannot be considered for that. However, if what you need is representations of colors, just so that you can see a differentiation between RGB, cyan, yellow, magenta, and all of that kind of stuff, then that actually makes a heck of a lot more sense. And if you're in a typical office type of scenario use case and more writing, typing, coding, especially for coding, this lends itself to be really good. The Touch edition is a huge plus because you are then very much kind of tied to just the display and interaction with the display, sort of like a tablet, but it's hooked up to your computer, and your keyboard in front of you, and maybe the mouse if you need. So that becomes a really nice setup in its own, and it's a shame that the 13K black and white version doesn't have touch. To my knowledge, I don't think that they even have a variation of a black and white panel that has touch layer and touch capabilities. On the other hand, you do have the lack of mountability for this one. I've already said, because it depends on the AC or the mains power, you would want to be able to kind of mount it on something and just place it where you want. Unfortunately, with this, you can't. Of course, there are things that you can use because it's fairly small-ish for a monitor, right? So I think that it would be possible to find tablet mounting wall mounts or Visa mounts or something like that that's going to kind of clamp it down and hold it. And that, I think, would be a viable solution for mounting a device like that to your existing setup, because it does have that front light, so it's fairly independent as far as where you can mount it. Of course, it benefits from the environmental light, but you're not 100% dependent on it like you are with our LCD panels, for example. So that is the Dasung 13K color. quite an interesting development, and I think quite an important development and step forward in real-world usability and applicability of computer monitors that are using ePaper technology. What do you think about these displays? Do you think that the price justifies what you actually get from this type of technology? And which one would you prefer? Would you prefer the black and white version or this one? A lack of mount, but you have added touch, you have added color content and nicer front light. Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below, and the next video that is coming up is actually pitting this one against or versus the black and white version, and I'm gonna be doing a direct side-to-side comparison in a very similar kind of lighting conditions and setup like this one here, so that we can actually have a 1-to-1 ratio and a comparison point between a black and white version of 13K and a color version of the Dasung 13K. Thank you so much for watching, stay safe, stay healthy, and see you in the next video. Bye!